obscure world of parking. We use it every day, but have we really capitalized on the intricacies of our industry? In this podcast, the Parking Network will go behind the scenes and talk to industry professionals about all things parking, from the horizon of evolving technology and even stories of the old days. We hope to encourage and inspire operators and property managers alike to look at parking through a new lens. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Our Parking Industry Podcast. On today's episode, we have a treat for you. We are going to be talking with Clyde Wilson, and we are going to get a stories from the road. So TPN, I'm Krista Oline, by the way. TPN has been in the parking audit business for over 25 years. So audit is kind of a nasty word sometimes, but what we do is we review the financial and operational components of a parking facility to look for mishaps or trouble and try to help the operators and the property owners correct that trouble. And sometimes we have seen actual theft, and sometimes it's not really theft that's causing the loss of revenue, it's other attributing factors. So we're going to hear from Clyde today about a story from one of the audits we historically did as a company and kind of see what can happen whenever things are not being reviewed and not being looked at from an outside perspective, down to the details of what's happening on the day-to-day financial pieces and operational pieces. It's a multi-component factor that we're looking at here. So I'm Krista Oline, and this is Clyde Wilson, and welcome to this episode of Stories from the Road.
Thank you very much. That's an exciting subject. To put together Stories from the Road was very interesting for me because I had to think back over all the interesting things that we've done in the last 25 years in the parking audit business. When we started the Parking Network, it really wasn't started as an audit company, but it very quickly evolved into an audit company. And as it evolved into a parking company, we were just treated with all kinds of surprises as we moved into this audit business. And I think we, as former parking operators, just like our clients, thought the majority of parking revenue loss at the time was due to theft. Our impression, certainly we had managed it and we had caught thieves over the years. It was just a part of our job day to day. And we thought that's where the loss was. And we didn't realize that it was really us that was the loss. So while there was always theft, and we always found theft to some degree, but it was never very much. I don't think I can say there was a single audit that we've ever done that we didn't find some level of theft. But as it turned out, that was not even close to the majority of revenue that we lost and that we were finding in the parking garages. It was parking accounting mistakes, management mistakes. I think we, as the Parking Network, in our podcasts a few months ago, had a long discussion about the very complexity of this job that the parking operators have. Mm-hmm. That they are in a job as parking operators managing millions of dollars that are $10 transactions and $300 transactions. Parking garages can manage more transactions than big department stores do. Mm-hmm. And we have never in the parking industry put the emphasis that was necessary on the control equipment that we put in place and in the people that we hired to account for these. So guess what? Mistakes happened. Mostly honest mistakes. The people in the parking business are very conscious of how hard their job is, so they work at it very hard. But there's just so many moving parts that they make mistakes. So here's a good one that I thought at the time when we realized what had happened, I thought it was a perfect example of really a pretty good team of people managing a pretty complex garage that just made a mistake. So this one, we were doing an audit. This was in November. So part of, we start the audit. It's a fairly good size, about a 750 space garage, and it's built on a walking mall. So it not only covers the office building that was our client that had hired us to audit the garage, but it also covered this tremendous amount of transient traffic from people coming to park there every day um, to go to the mall and shop. So it had a high number of transient cars every day. So I'll never forget this. When we walked in to announce ourselves into the office, there were I think four people working in the office. And the young guy that was the manager, when he realized who we were, he said, "Oh God, we're going to get killed." And I said, "No, really, we're not. We're here to do an audit, and we'll do a fair audit, and
Mhm.
I'm sure you'll do fine." Um, and so we proceeded with the audit, and part of our audit procedures. I mean, we literally during that time in the audits, we touched everything. We touched every single thing that there could possibly be. And we had already been there for 24 hours. So we already knew this garage. We were there for 24 hours before they knew. So we kind of knew the garage. We kind of knew what we were seeing. We knew it looked like a fairly well-run garage. It was clean and safe looking. It was very, very busy. The equipment seemed to work very well. Everything was really running pretty well. And so we had a good feeling about this one as we started, but we still had to do the audit. So we're doing the audit. And one of the things that we do during the audit, and generally it was me as we were walking around, um, the auditors were doing their job, and I would take pictures of everything. We looked at signage, traffic flow, condition of the concrete, everything. So we took pictures of everything: the entry, the exit plaza, the equipment, graphics, everything. So we get home and we're starting the early days of um, preparing the audit, and we've only been into it a couple of days. And our lead auditor gives me a call in the middle of the afternoon one day and says, um, "Do you have the pictures? Have you put them on the server yet?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry, I haven't." She said, "Would you mind putting the pictures up? We need to take a look at some of the pictures." And I said, "Sure, sure." So I stopped, instantly uploaded all the pictures that we had taken onto the server. And it wasn't but about 30 minutes later, and she called me back with the famous statement that we always said: "You're not going to believe this." And I said, "You know what my answer to this is? We've been doing this too long. I'll believe anything you tell me." And she said, "Well, we remember in the interview, one of our standard interview questions that was in our big 40-page interview checklist, one of those questions was, when was the last rate increase that you took? And can we have a copy of it so we know what the rates were before and what they are now?" And they said, "Well, yes, we did a rate increase in January. So we're there in November. So we have almost 11 months completed in this rate increase." So they said, "We did the rate increase in January, and we'll get you a copy of the rate increase." And they did. While we were sitting there talking, they opened up and they said, "Here's what the rates were. Here's our letter that we gave to the owners about the proposed rate increase. So there's our rate increase." So fine. So we had that in our audit files so that we could use in our section when we evaluated parking rates. So the young lady that was head of the audit department said, "Well, we looked at the rate increase notice, and we found the picture that you took of the rate sign. And they changed the rate sign and made all the necessary changes in the sign for the new rates, but they didn't change the fee computer, so they've been ringing up the old rates all year.
Oh no.
The current loss that we're at is $275,000 this year.
Wow.
It was high transient, and so even that little bit of rate increase, and the rate increase was kind of through the rate structure. They had kind of, when they did the rate increase, they did it the right way. They really looked at the whole the rate structure, and changed rate structure a little bit. $275,000 in 11 months. So it was headed to $300,000, and if it had been 4 or 5 years before we showed up, it would have been $1 million loss that had nothing to do with theft.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been a mistake. And, maybe they would have caught it the next January if they relooked at the rates again. They may have caught it that time. But right now, it was just a simple mistake from a crew that really had a pretty good audit. I mean, we found some of our traditional audit findings in this garage, but in a little tiny bit of theft, the kind of theft that we generally find. We also found another thing that was not theft, but it always paid for our audit. And we found it in every single garage that we audited. And this again kind of was proving my point that the majority of revenue loss that we found had nothing to do with theft.
Mm-hmm.
Theft was certainly a factor. But the other thing that we found was when the equipment installers install the rates into the new equipment, there's always a grace period
Mm-hmm.
of 10 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is. And what they would do is they would install the rates with the grace period, and then they would start the rate at the end of the grace period. So the rate was $3 at the end of 30 minutes. Well, they didn't start the 30 minutes until the 11th minute. But that's not the way rates work. Your time in the garage starts from the time you came in. So at the moment you pull the ticket, your first 30 minutes starts running. And at 31 minutes, you move to the next rate structure. The parking equipment installers back at a few years ago wouldn't think about that. They weren't managing a garage.
Yeah.
And nobody checked them. So they would put the rates in to start at the 11th minute. So you would lose 11 minutes.
On every transient parker.
On every transient parker, you would lose 11 minutes. So that always, it never, ever, the revenue find there was always more than the cost of our audit. So we always found that one immediately, and that was the good one, that all you had to do was the very next day change the rate structure and the revenue went up.
Yeah.
So it was an instant find, but it was not a theft. It was not a loss to theft. It just continued to prove our point as to how much of the revenue loss in a parking facility has nothing to do with theft. It has to do with the parking people have so many details to manage in parking that nobody really thinks of how many details there are to managing 700 monthly parkers, all with different rates, all with different schedules as to when this parking rate ends within that company. 400 different transient transactions a day, and nights and weekends with different rates. There's so many things to manage, but they make mistakes. We never thought, occasionally we ran across just a poor management group, but that was really rare. Most of the times these are just mistakes, honest mistakes, but they cost a lot of money.
Yeah, they add up. So one of the pieces to that is that it's not like every parker, the maximum rate is no more than $50 at most locations for a transient rate.
Right.
So when you're thinking about those smaller transactions, the rolling grace period really adds up whenever you think about the quantity of those. So the value of each one isn't that much, but whenever you reconsider the value in relation to the quantity of how many times that happens in a day, that's where it really starts to impact the revenue of the facility just from, like you said, a simple mistake.
A simple mistake. And this particular garage that we're talking about, like I said, it was built on a retail mall, a walking mall. The number of transactions was very, very large, much higher than the typical downtown garage. So to pile on top of the $275,000 because they failed to change the rate was the significant revenue loss from the rolling grace period. So we added this all up, and it was a fairly big day for us and a tough day for the operator. But they got through it. They were a very good operator, and they admitted to what the findings were and said, let's fix these now. And they jumped in and fixed them, and life went on. They didn't lose their job there. They must continue to do a better and better job. As we went back a few years later, they just continued to do a better job. So it all worked out good.
Our role as the big bad auditor is never to be the big bad auditor. It's always to
Right.
be the people that are coming in to help the facility function better, to help the revenue increase by simple finds and simple fixes, to help just overall the way it's managed, the way it's operating, and the revenue that's being generated by everything that's going on inside of each unique facility. So the stories from the road, I always love these whenever we talk about Clyde's history and the industry and the things that he and our company have seen throughout the years, and how we can help spread those ideas and just, tell a story that helps you gain knowledge as someone that's in the industry to maybe apply to your daily life or maybe pass on to somebody else. So we are glad you're here, and we're glad you're joining us on the Our Parking Industry podcast. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
To quote one of the greatest business minds of our time, Charles Munger, he said, "The best thing a human can do is help another human being know more." Here on Our Parking Industry podcast, we want to provide knowledge and resources. If you heard something that sparked your curiosity in today's episode, please reach out on our socials at TPN Consulting. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe and follow. See you next time on Our Parking Industry.